Okay, hello. I am doing for my final presentation a podcast slash interview with my grandfather who did relief work with the homeless population in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, was it?
Yes, 2010, yes.
2010. Okay, yes. So, let me see. I cannot minute. Okay. So, first of all, is there anything you'd like to say about the circumstances that led you to Haiti in the 2010s? What agency did you go with? That kind of stuff.
Um, so what led us to that, so it was a group of us, because I was at the time working in a hospital. I was working in an ER, and we heard about the earthquake, of course, like everybody else did. And there were several doctors there who had worked with Doctors Without Borders, and they were looking for people to come out and help because the tragedy was pretty significant out there. So a group of us got permission from our um, directors, and when we informed them what we were doing, a whole group of people volunteered a bunch of equipment.
Wow.
So we had ortho equipment that was donated, saline, IV tubing, IV supplies, Dopplers, you name it. There was just all kinds of stuff that was donated to us. And that's kind of how it happened. That's kind of where it got started from with several people. I think a total of 10 of us went down to help out.
I see. Wow, that is very interesting. And it's awesome that you were able to get that time off work from your boss.
Yeah, that was very, very generous of them. But they were all like really into it. They realized what was going on down there.
Yeah.
So
So, what were your immediate first thoughts upon arriving in Haiti?
first thoughts were I've never arrived at that point in time in my life. Only one other time had I arrived in an airport like that. But this airport wasn't, arrived in airports that were, you would call them open
Mhm.
airports, I guess.
Yeah.
But these were like, it was like a grass hut. The airport was damaged from the earthquake. They had a whole other area we had to go to when we get off the plane. So there's no terminal to go to or anything like that. And then the second thing that hit us when we got to our destination was at the first time was Jock Mail,
Mhm.
and it was the smell. It was just smelt like if you came across a dead animal on the road or a dead animal on the trail, and you know what that dead animal smells like. It was
Yeah.
like all over. Everywhere we
Wow.
went in the streets, it was pretty putrid. So that was a I would say my second thought was that. Also, when we got off the plane, we had so much supplies that we had brought with us. We had to figure out exactly how to get it off the plane, how to carry it to where it was going to be stored so that we could have access to it when we needed. So the Canadians had already been there before us, and they had a warehouse set up for us where we could store all the supplies. And they actually uh, listed it in and checked everything and put it where it was supposed to be. So if we came back to the warehouse and said, "Oh, I need some Ringer's lactate or I need internal fixators or whatever," they knew exactly where it was. So they were really good about organizing it as far as medical supplies went for us.
Okay, I see. So the main focus of this podcast slash interview is on homelessness. So what were the conditions that most of the people after the earthquake and in general, like the homeless people there that you saw, what kind of conditions did they live in?
They were living poorly. So aside from just being homeless, there was a lot of injuries. There were a lot of orphans, a lot of kids. I mean, hundreds, probably thousands of kids that were orphaned during this thing, and they were living homeless on the streets. And along with people just really had nowhere to go. So they were living in tents. I personally brought several tents because we knew we were going to be living in tents when we went there.
Hmm.
And we started out in tents, then we ended up getting to sleep on a porch. But all the tents that we brought in to live in, once our uh, once our service there was done, we just gave the tents to the people because they literally had nowhere to stay. Um, in this, most people knew about the earthquake through the eyes of Port-au-Prince, which is the capital of Haiti.
Mhm.
But that's also where all the wealthy people live. So a lot less homeless people there until after the earthquake. Where my team went is we went to Jacmel and Kai, and in those two areas, there was already a homeless problem to begin with,
Yeah.
uh, let alone what happened with the earthquake, which just displaced thousands and thousands of people. I think estimates, like I want to say in about January of 2011, I remember reading that the estimates were close to like 300,000 deaths, something like that. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but I think the estimates were around 300,000 people had died, and numerous people were injured who died later on, even after that time. And then, of course, if you followed the news, then there was cholera that popped back up and killed a bunch of more other
Wow.
people. But each event just left people with no resources, and Haiti was already pretty poverty restricted, except in Port-au-Prince, where most of the wealthy people live. The lawyers and governors and political people all lived in Port-au-Prince. So that place was pretty well taken care of. But in Jacmel and Kai, I would say most of the people that I saw were basically coming off the streets or coming from the jungles or the woods or the hills where they were trying to do the best they could to live someplace because there was just no place to live at that time. Most of the buildings in those areas were completely collapsed.
I see.
So,
What Obviously you're not part of the Haitian government, but what did you
no,
observe the government trying to do to help the situation? Do you believe that aid was for the homeless problem was distributed evenly or more focused on the richer
it's
sectors?
it's really difficult to say. We were there for a 10-day stint. In that 10 days, we worked out of a hospital, St. Michael's in Jacmel, and we had administrators and political figures come to us. There were restrictions on what we could and couldn't do. So we had, how do I don't want to word this because the situation there was pretty horrific at that time. This was literally right after the earthquake. And I don't think the government had gotten everything together to try and help out with that. They didn't know what to do.
Hmm,
So a lot of their government buildings had collapsed in Port-au-Prince, and that's not counting these little outlying facilities where you might have had some lawyers living and stuff like that, or political figures, and hospitals. Same thing. The hospital that we were actually working at out of had been condemned by the Canadians. And the administrators of that hospital had some really strict rules on what we could and couldn't do. They wouldn't let us work 24 hours. We wanted to take, because there was just lines and lines of people waiting to be seen, people with broken arms, broken legs, and then just numerous different things. And at a certain time, every single day, the administrators would come through and tell us we had to stop, and we didn't have a choice.
wow.
We couldn't because we couldn't break their laws. Um, one incident I remember a 15-year-old girl, she had a crush injury to her chest. She ended up having a pulmonary embolism. We had no we could intubate her, but we had no machines to put her on to help her breathe. So we had to just sit there and bag her. It's called an ambu bag. You sit there so you can breathe for her. And we did that literally all day long from about 6 o'clock in the morning until about 7 o'clock at night. And then the administrators came through and they said, we either have to ship her out or you have to leave her be. And we couldn't just leave her be. So it ended out that I want to say it was either Matt Damon um,
Matt
or
Damon.
Brad Pitt who had their private planes there. And one of them, I can't remember who, but one of them let us get her on the plane and fly her to Florida,
Wow.
where I don't know what happened from that point on. I don't think the outcome was going to be very good
I see.
with her, but they would literally let her die as opposed to us continuing to help her out. And again, I know you're asking like a lot of the political parts of it. but you have and the homeless part of it, but you have to understand that I was on the medical part of it,
Of course, of
and
course.
that was kind of my focus at the time.
Okay.
So,
From the medical angle of this, the way you experienced this like horrific event, was there
mhm.
anything like administratively that you would have changed, like that the people there had you do? Is there something else you would have
There,
prioritized as
so
opposed?
so one of the things that really shocked me was these higher ups, these administrative people came through, and they were very insistent with us getting names, first names, last names, and if they had an address for these injured people who had nowhere to turn, because they were saying that at some point in time in the future, we're going to have to charge them.
Oh,
And I just found that to be horrific. That was probably the biggest horrifying thing that I saw with any of the political administrative people. Now, that's not to say everybody was like that. There were some ladies from Haiti that were working there, and there was obviously a communication or a language barrier. We did the best we can, but you could tell that they obviously cared about these people and wanted to help them. But from an administrative point of view, we were basically, I mean, these were just a homeless, poverty, displaced, wounded, injured people, and the administration was worried about getting their information so that they could charge them for the services later.
it's
And
horrible.
the thing is, we're from America. We were giving them our services, so they were taking advantage of that to try to charge these people, even though their people or their hospital staff wasn't actually doing the services. And I found that shocking. I was like pretty horrified and angry by that. But again, it's a different country, it's a different way. There was nothing we could do. We can't jump in and say, no, we're going to do it this way. We were guests in another country, even though we were helping out. So you still had to follow their rules.
Yes, of
So that was
course.
kind of tough.
Man, that does sound that sounds quite
Yeah,
horrible. Like to think
yeah,
that your whole house, your whole everything gets destroyed, and then they go after and charge you
yeah,
money when you have
yeah,
nothing. Yeah, that's
yeah. Yeah, like I said, we were there. I mean, so again, how do I describe this? So in Port-au-Prince, a lot of companies from around the world sent in all kinds of stuff. So there was groups from China, there was groups from uh, Pakistan. There
wow.
was a group of Pakistan that was there. There were a bunch of different groups from all around the world that were trying to help out. Certain equipment was dropped in, so they had these big like containers that were literally surgical containers. So inside those containers, there was tables, there was everything you needed to perform any kind of surgery. All the equipment, all the meds, everything was in those containers. And they had several of those that were donated and dropped in,
Mhm.
but the Haitian government wouldn't let us use them
Wow.
because I think they saw the value in what they had, and my guess, and I don't know this for a fact, so I'm just saying I don't know what else they would use them for except the emergency that we had. My guess is that it was probably going to be sold so that they could make some money off of it. And again, I have no proof of that. I just don't understand why they wouldn't let us use these facilities. And they had armed guards around them. They had armed people
Wow.
standing around them so that you couldn't get in. We got to actually go in one and look at it. They let us go in and look at it, but we couldn't use it. So, and they had several of those dumped off. So that was another thing that I could see from the political side that, I don't know exactly what was going on again, but it seemed pretty shady to me.
Yeah. Is government putting the interests of monetization above the needs of the poverty and the homeless? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Needs of impoverished people, not the poverty.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But
Yeah.
yeah, that is that is
Yeah. So,
absolutely horrible.
yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there hmm, is there anything else you noticed while during your 10-day stint in Haiti that you would like to talk about?
Well, one of the most morbid things I think was that the whole stay there, that smell that I was talking about, you
Mhm.
kind of got used to it, but it seemed to also get worse. And you were in Jacmel, there was just all these buildings that were just rubble. And underneath that rubble was bodies. Those
Wow.
bodies were rotting, and it was literally leaching out into they have an open gutter system there, and it just drains pretty much out into the ocean. At least they did back then. This was 2010. Things might have changed since then. I don't know. Um, but that was pretty nasty. And then we did get a day to go in, or half a day, I should say, to go to Port-au-Prince and tour some of the devastation there.
Hmm.
And I think what shocked me the most about that is, yes, they still had some of these issues, but they had backhoes and cranes and forklifts and front end loaders. They had all this equipment to try to clean things up and to try to rescue people that might have been trapped under buildings. That the city of Jacmel and Kajacmel, none of that was offered to them. It was all in Port-au-Prince.
Wow.
So all this equipment to help save lives or to help rebuild or clear streets or make things more sanitary was all given to the town of Port-au-Prince. That, as far as I can tell. Now, again, I think we flew in maybe 2, 3 days after the earthquake, and we were only there for 10 days. But I was like, I don't understand why some of this stuff can't be where we are. And if you were to look at the epicenter of the actual earthquake, Jacmel, Kai Jacmel, they were almost an equal distance as far as from the epicenter of the earthquake as Port-au-Prince was.
Ah.
So the damages that was on TV, where you saw Port-au-Prince and all this stuff, these Jacmel, Kai Jacmel, same exact thing, except they didn't have the same type of infrastructure that Port-au-Prince did.
Hmm.
So the devastation was much, much worse.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so,
the horrible event was even worse for the people that needed it the most,
oh yeah, yeah,
relief. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. That
So,
is
and it,
incredibly disturbing. Yes.
yeah. And our days were spent literally first thing in the morning, where there's already a line outside that had been sleeping there from the day before every time we showed up. And we tried to see as many people as we could, and in every single day. And again, it wasn't just our group that was there working at a St. Michael's. The Haitian nurses and doctors were there too, so we were working alongside them as best we could with communications. There was a lot of orthopedic injuries, as you would expect in a
Mm.
situation like that. And so we had brought a bunch of internal and external fixators. These are devices that you can use to set bones, keep them set until they healed up and stuff like that, which was needed a lot there. But in that 10 days, we used all the supplies that we brought, and we had to start relying. I want to say, I think we got supplies from China. There was a group from China that was
Hmm.
there, and we got some of their equipment because we had just run out. And it wasn't us that facilitated that, it was the Canadians. So they were the ones. I was very impressed with the Canadians there was the whole time, because they really seemed very organized and what
Wow.
was going on. So,
I see. Wow.
yeah,
That's thank goodness they were there then.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with
Oh,
me,
you're
Papa.
welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Once again, this has been my podcast slash interview with my grandfather, Gary Loudermilk. And yeah, thank you again for coming on.
You're very welcome, buddy.